Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Randall Richmond, and I'm the Director of Athletics here at Kent State University and a proud graduate of the NCAA Charles Wickham Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute helped me refine who I was as a man well before focusing on who I was as an administrator. Within the program, I developed lifelong friendships, colleagues, and confidants who helped me discover my true purpose in this profession, which is to be a transformational leader that has a positive impact on people's lives well beyond sports. And as the great orator Big Sean often says, the energy you give is what you manifest. Peace.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Marcus Bowman. Marcus is the Deputy Athletics Director, Chief Financial Officer, and Business Strategy at University of Oklahoma. Greetings, Marcus. Thanks for joining us here on 1Q.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. I'm happy to have you on. You've been there at Oklahoma since August 2020, right? Midst of the pandemic. You've been there for roughly a year and a half. Prior to Oklahoma, you spent time at UNLV and University of Pittsburgh, of course, where you were a student athlete. In the industry for roughly 16 years. So you're a veteran, have some experience, worked with a number of different leaders and done a number of different things. Of course, now there with Joe Castiglione, you work with one of the elephants in the college athletics profession in terms of leadership development. So I kind of want to talk to you about some of your role and what you do, but also a little bit about leadership, right? Your title, business strategy, includes those words, which can mean a number of different things in college athletics, right? Business strategy in the corporate world can be anything from marketing to management to executive decisions to are we going to change the whole industry we operate in, all that kind of stuff. So walk us through your philosophy on business strategy. And then if possible, give us an example of your philosophy on business strategy in action in terms of your role there at Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Tom. I'm really excited to be on. And what I would say is business strategy, it's exactly what you said. It includes all of that. And I don't think that you can put strategy or business strategy in any kind of a box. I think it depends on where you are. It depends on where you are at that particular time, not just the place, but maybe where things are in the industry. And so what I would say my general philosophy on business strategy, how does your overall business strategy, particularly the financial components of that strategy, align with the overall goals of the athletic department? And for instance, at Oklahoma, our goal is to be the premier athletic department of the 21st century. So when you think about college athletics and this new era of where we're going in the 21st century and what we're embarking on, it's ever changing. It is changing daily. I think the industry obviously looks different now than it did 12 months ago in the midst of the pandemic and even 6 months ago. And certainly it's going to continue to look different as we move forward. So how are we making sure that our business strategy aligns with the ability to stay nimble and flexible and change with those times? So for example, kind of the history of our industry has always been kind of from a business contract and financial arrangement, you might enter into very long-term deals. And while that still may be the case in some areas and certainly probably makes sense in some areas, now more than ever, it might be a better business strategy to enter into some more shorter-term relationships as the landscape around us changes so frequently. You got to be able to change with it. Or if you do enter into some of those long-term deals, making sure that you structure them where you can still maintain some flexibility and take advantage of, the potential upside or certainly try to avoid any of the potential downside.
When you look at it, I think right off the bat, when you started, you were working in some type of business role in athletics there at Pitt. From there, the evolution of your responsibilities, were you looking at things in terms of, so in the classroom, I learned about accounting and I learned about, finance and learned about making sure our expenses are less than our revenue, making sure our profit margin, those kinds of things. And then now you're looking at planning forward and how can we stay nimble? So tell me about that evolution in terms of your career when you're working in business in college athletics.
Yeah. So, the business of college athletics is different than the business of, if I was working in a for-profit company or things of that nature. Higher education, I should say, is different. But at the same time, for me, starting off in the financial capacity, and certainly still serving in a heavy financial capacity now, I'm grateful for that, because I think it gave me, or gives you, the best baseline of how the entire industry operates, because you have the ability to work with everyone across the organization. Because when you think about running any type of organization, whether it is higher education, whether that is a for-profit endeavor or industry, or running a restaurant, at its core, being successful comes down to how you manage your two most important resources, your human resources and your financial resources. And so starting with that financial background gave me the ability to really understand that. Now, as I learned and as I evolved in college athletics, one of the things that you have to understand is, while it may have a financial component to it, there's not just always just a direct ROI on everything. If we do this, it's going to bring us back this. You have to look a little bit deeper, and going back to, thinking through your business strategy. How does this investment, or how does, spending money on this, how does that help our overall strategies in terms of the goals that we're trying to accomplish? And so for me, being able to have that financial background, or that financial baseline, allowed me to understand, dollars and cents. But at the same time, as I've evolved, and as I've been able to get involved in a lot of other areas in our department, I understand the nature of how you need to make decisions that, while they may have a financial component to it, it may not necessarily be as black and white as 1 + 1 = 2.
Thinking about what I'm learning, right, in my MBA now, in terms of profit margin, right, in terms of profit, and making sure we're in the black, if we can be in the black in college athletics. When you got to make decisions, is it always, how can we increase the lines of revenue? Or when you have to make a decision, should we lower our expenses? Like, especially at a school like Oklahoma, right, where it's like the revenue is probably a little bigger than other schools. Like, how do you go about, is it always a constant search for how else can we bring in money? Or is it, how else can we increase this profit margin by lowering expenses, or just a mix of both? Like, tell me about that aspect of strategy when you're talking about college athletics.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, college athletics is very broad. I mean, you have schools and programs that are, managing a much smaller budget, and then you have schools that are managing a much higher budget. But still, at its core, in terms of your financial decision making, it still kind of boils down to the same thing. At Oklahoma, we're very fortunate. We're one of the very few athletic departments that is self-sustaining, not receiving any institutional support or anything like that. And so that comes with a certain level of higher responsibilities, per se. But it's not as black and white as, thinking about it from a profitability standpoint in terms of how you spend money. I mean, we're not a for-profit industry. So our goal is to bring in resources so we can ultimately take those resources and pour them back in to our student athletes, and reinvest them into our young people, and our staff, and our coaches, and trying to be that best athletic department. So we're not looking at it from a standpoint of how much money can we make to, increase a bottom line or profitability. We're looking at it as how much resources can we bring in so we can put those resources back into our programs and what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Is there an aspect of, when you talk about strategy, so we want to accomplish these things in terms of reinvesting, so we need to bring in this much money so we can be able to accomplish those things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're always forecasting, right? I mean, we're always looking at, what's the day look like? What's the next few months looks like? How does this year look? But also obviously looking at, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. But, still understanding that, being able to be nimble and flexible, kind of like I mentioned. But yes, I mean, there's a level, if we say, for us to be, this successful and be able to do these things, there's a level of resources that we got to go out and get, that we got to go out and acquire, to be able to pour those back in. And there's a high price at times to being successful in college athletics, and so we want to do everything that we can to make sure that we're staying at that level.
Yeah, I ask one more question down this line, and then we'll switch it up. But I guess in terms of you and your responsibility, when a strategy calls for increasing an input of revenue or resource so that you can do the things that you had forecasted to do for the student athletes, are you the person that decides how to bring in that money, or do you say, here's what we need to do, and you give it off to the next person in another department to say, this is how much we need to bring in, go bring it in? Or are you involved in the aspect of how we're going to bring in the new resource?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty heavily involved in those aspects. I mean, I think generally, I mean, most things are collective in our department. I mean, we talk about them as a collective leadership team, and people have various different responsibilities. But I mean, I'm pretty heavily involved in everything from A to Z from a financial component standpoint. So, whether it's identifying kind of what our needs are, and then establishing or working with folks on how we go out and acquire those needs. And there are times where there are contracts that have to be reviewed. There are financial arrangements that we have to review and negotiate and see kind of how we benchmark or stack with some of our other peers. And so, I mean, I'm heavily involved in that process pretty much across the board.
Yeah, which is interesting. College athletics itself is interesting, right?
It is very much so.
Yeah. So thinking about business strategy, financial strategy, since right off the bat, finished playing, now you work in athletics business. There had to be some lessons in leadership you learned, right? You can put your nose down and just be a business person and stick with that and not be concerned about leading other people. But the nature of the business and the nature of who you have worked for calls for you to be a leader and to learn how to work collaboratively. I wonder about some lessons in leadership you've learned and how they have evolved in the, I guess, 16 years since you've been working in college athletics.
I mean, I've just been blessed and fortunate to work for some incredible people and be around some great mentors and leaders. And obviously, I'm around one of the best, if not the best, right now. And they've allowed me over my career to be involved in a lot of various different areas in college athletics, and it taught me to see that bigger picture of not just financials, but particularly how to lead an organization. And what I would say, I mean, there's a litany of things that we could probably spend a whole day on, but for me, I think the biggest thing, or one of the biggest leadership lessons that I've learned, is the importance of establishing, developing, and nurturing meaningful relationships. And that is relationships up and down the organization. And so, I pride myself on being a relationship oriented individual. Maybe not a lot of financial people approach things that way like I do, but I pride myself on being a relationship oriented person where we can talk things out. And for me, I have what I call 3 principles on, effective relationships. For me, the first thing is connectivity. Try to find something that we connect on, and right off the bat, that allows us to establish some level of relationship. Authenticity, being my true authentic self. And I don't think we can have a meaningful or effective relationship if we're not being authentic. And then the third thing is intentionality. Being intentional about staying connected, being intentional about having certain touch points. And so for me, understanding that ability to manage effective relationships, whether it's with, folks that report to you or work with you, whether it's your colleagues across the organization, whether it's those that you report to, whether it is those outside of the industry, whether it's those across campus, whether it's your board, wherever it may be, that ability to manage effective relationships is really, really critical in leadership.
It is. So let me see if I can reiterate those: connectivity, authenticity, and intentionality. Those are the 3. I wonder about, how do you establish that right off the bat, right? You come in, so you came in a year and a half ago, and if that's what you have led with throughout your career, how do you start the process of connectivity, right? Authenticity probably has always been there. Like, if you're just you. But connectivity and then intentionality, if you were to talk to somebody young coming in the profession on how you lead with those things, how would you do that?
I think there's a variety of different ways that you can do it. Last year, obviously, coming in the middle of the pandemic, what I probably would have generally done, or how I generally approach coming into a new situation, or, coming into trying to manage a new relationship. I like to be face to face. I like to make sure that we're chatting. I like to make sure that we're, we're going to lunch, we're going for coffee. I like to see facial expressions. I like to see body language. Obviously, walking into last year or the last couple years that we've been in, there's some aspects of that maybe have not been directly there. So then you have to find other ways of how you connect. And obviously, whether it's Zoom, phone calls, things of that nature allow with that. But not just that physical connection of seeing and talking to somebody. Also, when I say connectivity, I also think about something that we might have in common. So, when I was coming here, I tried to do as much research as I could on some of the individuals that were working here. Some I was fortunate to already know. And so, when I find those things out, it kind of allows us to already have something that we connect on. So if I'm a young person coming up in this industry and, I'm seeing folks that I aspire to be like, or individuals that have really, really achieved something at a very, very high level in college athletics. I'm reading what is their background. I'm reading through how they got there and finding out if there's something that we connect on, whether that is we have very similar hobbies, or we are from a very similar area, or very similar background, or so something like that. So that's also a part of being able to connect with individuals. There's a physical connection of us talking, us seeing each other, but before you get there, trying to find out, how you can connect and find some commonalities, maybe.
Yeah, that's important. And I imagine that won't stop even as you progress through your career, right? Those types of things. If that's what you lead with, you'll always do
Absolutely. I
your
mean, it
research on
can't.
people, and yeah,
Yeah, it can't stop. I mean, I think that's critically important.
yeah. And then I guess being intentional fits right in, because being deliberate on making sure you connect with the people who you work with and work for and those type of things. So
Absolutely. It all goes together. Be intentional about that connectivity part, be intentional about how you stay in touch. You see something that somebody accomplished, maybe you're reading the D1 ticker or you're watching a game, making sure that you're taking that time to shoot that person a text, send them an email, tell them congratulations. So it's all of those little things in terms of the intentionality part that I think is really, really important.
I'll ask you one more question here before we wrap, and it kind of ties it all together, right? The financial strategy, business strategy, chief financial officer, deputy athletics director, leadership. Who knows where you or I'll be in the future? But the industry, like you mentioned, short-term or intermediate-term contracts, because who knows if you lock yourself into some long-term, by the time you get to the end of that, you may have set yourself up for failure, right? I think we've seen that in the industry, actually. But I wonder about your thoughts about the evolution of college athletics in terms of business strategy, in terms of leadership, in terms of everything that we see going on here. Just what are your thoughts on college athletics, the evolution of the industry?
Well, I still think college athletics is going to continue to thrive into whatever the next era is. For me, being a product of the student athlete experience and being a former student athlete myself, um, college athletics is always going to have a place in our society, so it's not going anywhere. Um, I think what we have to, as an industry, what we have to be mindful of and understanding of is that it's that age old saying, the only thing that's constant in life is change, right? So everything over time changes, it evolves. Um, you hope that it evolves for the better, but you know that it's going to evolve. And, I mean, things have probably been very static in college athletics for a long period of time. And we're seeing things now change at a very, 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 very rapid pace. And I think that pace that we've seen over the last 6 months, 12 months, things won't continue at that pace. Things will certainly kind of slow down and they'll level off a little bit. But I think understanding, where we're going and, kind of in the era of student athlete empowerment and things of that nature, we just have to be mindful that we have to be open to those changes and open to how we continue to make sure that college athletics thrives and that we continue to make sure that our why and our core of providing unbelievable educational opportunities for these young people stays at the forefront, while understanding that there are just some adjustments, that things that we have to make and be okay with.
I thought about one more question, if you allow. I guess everybody's responsibility in college athletics is important, but when you talk about business strategy, it's one of the ones that you're on the forefront of making sure we exist here, right? And they all tie to college, to the environment, for a successful environment for student athletes. But thinking about staying abreast of how things are now, where they're going, and understanding where we came from, what is your method for staying relevant? Like, is it a situation where, because of you are in the mix, in the nature of things, that's how you stay educated on how things are going? Or are you a researcher, or are you talking to people trying to figure out things, a little mix of all of it? Because the nature of the business, you can be in the mix and stay relevant just doing what you're doing. So I wonder about your, I guess, education process as you continue to evolve.
That's a really good question. I would say yes to everything pretty much that you said.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it starts with a level of research, keeping your eye on what's happening, where things are going. At the same time, you don't want to lose sight of what it is that you do well, because it's a lot easier to take things that you do well and make them better, versus sometimes taking things that you just don't do well at all, or maybe traditionally haven't done well, and trying to make those things good or great. It's the age of going from good to great, right? And so I think that you're always monitoring what others are doing. We're all connected somehow, and we all talk a lot in this industry. So yeah, certainly mindful of what some of our peers and our colleagues are doing, and you see something interesting, you reach out to somebody and you talk through it with them, and so that to me is always that's the fun part, that's the exciting part. But I think sometimes where you can get lost is not understanding what your core is and what you're great at, and maybe what has been something that's allowed you to be as successful as you are, because you are trying to reach for all of the, the new and flashy things. And so for me, that's kind of how I approach my education, or, my evolution, I think, of education. I mean, I like to read, a lot of articles and kind of read what's going on from a sports business perspective, but certainly, other parts of the industry as well, following, how things are happening at the national level. And, I'll be following, things that are happening at the NCAA convention, and, and things that are happening from a student athlete development perspective. So I think it's all relevant.
Yeah, which is important. I like what you said there, that you obviously want to stay up on the trends, but you also want to make sure your core, whatever your responsibility is, whatever you're doing that you're good at, you're hired to do, make sure you're great at that too, while you're staying educated on everything else. Well, Marcus, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ty.
That was Marcus Bowman. He is the Deputy Athletics Director and Chief Financial Officer over Business Strategy at University of Oklahoma. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.